You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, this episode is a trio of recordings in and about Virginia. The first and third segments are the two live recordings we did in front of fun and fabulous audiences at GalaxyCon Richmond in spring of 2023. Between them, we've dropped in a super fun interview we got to do with Jerry Chandler, a longtime friend of the show. The show notes for this episode will have a couple of relevant links, plus a link to Arcane Carolinas Volume 1, collecting a bunch of Charlie's notes and background information. Thanks for listening.
All right, I think we're recording. Yes, we are. Is that picking up my voice enough? Hey, we got one in the back. Sorry. All right, last call for raffle tickets. If you didn't get one and you want one, now's the time, because we are getting ready to blast off on a journey of discovery together as friends. Hello and welcome to Arcane Carolinas Live. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
By show of hands, who is familiar with Arcane Carolinas before this very moment? All right, there's a couple in the back. We got one up front. All right.
Hey, awesome.
I think we should introduce who we are and what we do in that case, so they're not like, what did I just step into?
Yes.
So we are a podcast that covers folklore, legends, myths, even modern weird stories, primarily out of North and South Carolina, but also we have a series called Arcane Destinations that we talk about other states. So that's why we're here in Virginia.
And we're not paranormal investigators. We don't think we have the secret sauce on this stuff. We don't think that we understand the basic truth of the universe. We think it's really fascinating folklore, and it's fascinating to think about.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're not going to sit here and tell you that I can definitively explain that this was a ghost and that's what this ghost was doing. You know, whatever. I felt a chill, therefore I know. That's not us. We take a more of a historical and contextual approach.
Yeah, we talk about this stuff not because we're convinced we understand everything, but because we think this is really fun to talk about. Also, it's a really important reflection of the history of a place and a really fun way to explore that history.
So the way our format works is we talk a little bit about the history of the area that we are covering. Since this is Virginia, the Commonwealth. Go ahead.
Also, importantly, when we do an episode, one of us does all the research, and in this case, it was Charlie, and one of us comes in totally blind, and in this case, it's me. So I have no idea what we're about to talk about, and whatever my reaction is whatever my reaction is.
All right, I'll give you a clue. The first two stories that we're doing today are from Richmond.
Okay,
our 10:30 session will be a Fairfax story, but for today we're doing two quick ones because we only have about 50 minutes out of Richmond.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that there's time for audience participation.
Yeah.
All right, so the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's not a state, it's Commonwealth.
What is the distinction?
I don't know.
Okay. Is the distinction that it takes up more space on signs?
Is it that their state troopers are overly aggressive?
Yes, it is. I stopped counting at 3 dozen between the state line and Richmond.
I feel like that might be a slight exaggeration. 3 dozen.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Dukes of Hazzard, just like outrunning the long arm of the law there? What were we doing? Yeah, anyway. Commonwealth of Virginia. In 1607, the London Company established the colony of Virginia, the first permanent English colony in the New World. And that is where Virginia's state nickname, the Old Dominion, comes from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The first successful English colony.
Yeah. The first one that stuck.
Right.
So upon first contact with European settlers, it is estimated that what we now call Virginia had Native American tribes in the region from 3 major groups, including the Algonquin, of whom many were aligned with the Powhatan Nation.
Yeah.
They primarily lived along the coast and the Tidewater region. Mm-hmm. Siouan people were found in the Piedmont region above the Fall Line, which is a restaurant called the Fall Line that I saw walking over here. I was like, I know that from my research.
Okay. What is the Fall Line?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a geographical boundary.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, and Iroquoian people in the interior, particularly in the mountains.
Yeah.
And this is the primary reason for the names of rivers being Native American names.
Oh, okay.
There's a really cool monument over at the state capitol complex about this fact. You walk around this like looping circle, and in the middle there's a fountain, and on that fountain are the names of all the bodies of water that have Native American names.
Oh.
So like the water flows up out of the fountain and over the thing, and then you can see the connection. It's pretty cool. I went over there yesterday and walked around.
Oh, awesome.
Its geographic shape was changed during the American Civil War. The state government of Richmond joined the Confederacy, but the northwestern counties wanted to stay Union, and they became West Virginia.
You know, there was actually a move at the time to name that state Allegheny.
I did not know that.
Yeah, because that's a section of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, so it was 18. So Virginia kind of changed shapes in 1863. Can we talk about the flag for a minute?
Sure.
It's my favorite state flag.
Okay.
It bears the motto, Sic Semper Tyrannis, which translates from Latin as thus always to tyrants,
Okay.
and has a lady with her boob out.
Oh, I'd never noticed.
Yeah, it's my favorite flag. The standing female figure represents virtue and is depicted as having vanquished tyranny.
You know, that flag is probably now illegal in Florida.
The reason she has her boob out, jokes aside, exposed breast, I'm sorry, is in the manner of, we're being serious now,
Now I will just laugh uncontrollably.
is in the manner of classical depictions of Amazons.
Oh, interesting.
So she's an Amazon that represents virtue that slew some king that represents tyranny.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a cool flag.
I'm a Wonder Woman fan. That sounds great.
There you go. And the slogan, Virginia is for lovers, has been its slogan since 1969. By show of hands, who likes that slogan? Okay, we got some people that like it, because there's a lot of things that are for lovers. You know, the backseat of a car is for lovers. You know, it's really, the fact that it has stuck since 1969, I'm like, well, they must really love it. Fun personal ties. My grandparents lived in Virginia for a while, and my parents visited the Luray Caverns on their honeymoon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been to the Luray Caverns.
My ancestors crawled ashore in the mountains of western North Carolina, and nobody really knows where they came from.
Yeah, well, there you go. And personally, we alluded to this earlier, I have been pulled over a lot in the state of Virginia.
I will simply say there's a reason why I was on the lookout for the State Highway Patrol, yes.
There should be a plaque with my name on it in the town of Dinwiddie for the amount of money that I have donated to their civic causes through my speeding tickets.
I just feel like it's not fair because we're from North Carolina, and North Carolina's NASCAR state, you know?
Yeah.
And they train us different down there.
Woo! I can beat them! You just keep going. So anyway, story one. Let's get more localized.
Okay.
The Virginia State Capitol Complex, you can actually go there. It's right down the street. I went there yesterday. It's really cool. It's open from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. So, you know, you could conceivably go there after dark and get really spooky. It's about a 12-minute walk from here. It's a 12-acre complex that includes a really nice park, like I said, the State Capitol Building, the Executive Mansion, the General Assembly Building, the State Supreme Court, an old bell tower, and a whole bunch of other stately buildings and monuments.
Okay.
It is literally a complex. It's really cool. All right, I'll stop. Whatever. I thought it was really.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's got boatloads of history. Like Thomas Jefferson conceptualized the Capitol building with some French designer. It was the seat of the Confederacy during the Civil War. It's been featured in multiple movies as stand-ins for like DC stuff. Remember the movie Dave about the guy that became president?
No.
Okay, it was in the 90s. I've never seen it, but I remember it. I remember the movie poster at Blockbuster.
I was doing a lot of things in the 90s, but I apparently was not watching that movie.
You weren't watching like wholesome PG-13 situational comedy movies where a guy that shouldn't become president becomes president?
Let's just say no.
Okay. Anyway, it's been in a bunch of movies. And it's got lots and lots of ghosts. Like the complex.
Okay. The mini buildings, a lot of ghost stories.
A lot of ghost stories.
Okay.
Yes, that's a very pragmatic way of putting it.
I'm hoping you're going to tell me that you saw some. I don't know.
Not anything. I went over there. I saw some guys walking on one of those tightrope things that you hang between two trees.
Okay.
Yeah, they were doing that. They were having a great time.
Cool.
There was a couple on a blanket on the lawn enjoying the sun,
Virginia,
which is for lovers.
Yes, hello. I was going to say they're out there living the motto.
Right. So I went over there yesterday afternoon, didn't see anything spooky. There are, of course, ghost tours that you can take, and lots of blogs online that'll tell you multiple ghost stories. But it's free to go over there and just walk around and take it all in. You don't have to pay for a ghost tour. You can just look up the stories online and go do your own ghost tour. But I found one particularly engaging book. That's what the raffle tickets are for, because we're going to give away a copy of it. To be clear, we are not affiliated with this author. We are not affiliated with this book. I asked for it for Christmas, and I got 2 copies. So I'm going to give away one of them. Thanks, Amazon Shopping, for not warning the person I already had it. So the author is a pretty reputable enough guy. He's an Army veteran. After he got out of the Army, he became a police officer. I looked him up on LinkedIn just to like make sure this guy wasn't like a total crackpot. I was like, let me...
LinkedIn is no guarantee.
Okay, well, he's got a lot of stuff on there. It sounds like he's probably been vetted several times.
All right.
His LinkedIn is tight. He keeps
All
it
right.
tight. So he seems reputable. Most of the stories that I'm going to share today come from him, and they are firsthand accounts. He managed to convince a whole bunch of staff and sworn police officers, just regular staff, like the person that checks coats, and as well as police officers that work at the Capitol.
Yeah.
To go on record, put their names in this book and say, no, I saw this, or
Really?
this happened. Dude, that's why I was this is really cool.
So this is not just a book that's like a bunch of stuff that he found on the internet.
No, yeah, this is nothing but firsthand accounts.
Okay, now I'm really interested.
With primary sources.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Now-
it's not I read this on a blog and I changed 2 words and printed it. Not that anyone's ever done that.
Yeah.
How many people here have ghost story books at home? Nobody. I feel really weird. Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me alone.
I mean,
and
I
raising
also
your
have
hand. Thank
like
you.
a million of them.
Right. Some of them, the quality differs. Sometimes you flip through it and you're like, wait, I know that place. That's not true.
Yeah.
This is not that. This gives real verifiable sources, and the foreword and the afterword are done by different reputable people that say, now I vouch for this guy. You know, this is who I am. You can contact me, that kind of thing. The Executive Mansion, the Supreme Court building, and the Old City Hall are all reported paranormal hotspots in the book. But because we are under the gun for the clock, I want to focus on 1 or 2 of the stories from
Yeah,
the
go for
Capitol
it.
building itself, which is the really stately looking one with the pillars. It looks like a Roman temple. Well, right now it's under construction and it looks like a bunch of scaffolding. But if you
One day, it will again look like a neoclassical building.
Right. So it's said to be home to disembodied voices during the dead of night, phantom footsteps, which I'm like, yeah, all right, maybe sounds echo, right? Out of the 2 of us, I'm more skeptical. He's more.
Oh, yeah, I'm not just ready to believe. I'm like already believing. So,
Yeah. But 2 things have appeared consistently amongst the testimonies given in this book that I thought was really interesting because it crossed multiple staff members and police officers at differing times, having reportedly had almost identical shared experiences without collusion.
okay.
Years between occurrences and people. So in 1998, and then again in 2001, on the 2nd floor of the Capitol building, there's a rotunda with a small desk and a telephone, little check-in station,
yeah.
right? 2 separate late shift officers had the same experience of watching that same telephone slide across the desk on its own.
Oh.
Like actual move, like the object moved across the
Yeah.
desk. And they were both people that were like, I don't buy into all that hubbub. That
Yeah.
kind of skeptic.
Right, yeah.
I'm not here for all the malarkey.
Right.
Just
Except for what they see personally.
exactly. And even then they're like, there's an earthquake. I don't know.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Right. But they were independent experiences. The author put them together because he apparently went around and pestered everyone.
I like this.
So I did wonder, I was like, well, how many people really work there, right? Maybe this is Joe told Bill the story and Bill forgot about it. And then years later was like, this happened to me. Like, no, there's 100 officers that work there on payroll spread across the complex. So it stands to reason, based on the testimony in the book, that it is accurate that these people didn't know each other, didn't talk to each other, worked in the building at different times, several years apart, and had the exact same experience of while they were on a conversation with their spouse, the phone moved away down the desk.
So part of what's interesting to me about that is that it isn't obviously hostile or malicious. It isn't activity that has a point, you know?
Right.
It's not.
It's almost curious.
It's not. Yeah. It's not like, oh, they appeared and told me a complicated story, and now I'm going to relate it.
It's like that cat that just like bats at your...
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's also not like I'm so special because the ghost knows me or whatever. You know, it's
I
like,
hate that. The
Right.
ghost knows me.
yeah, right.
We're friends.
It's not that. It's like something that's just sort of nonsensical.
We play words with friends.
Yeah, right. Mostly they're boo.
Sometimes it's whoa, and I have to tell them that's not a real word.
How do you find that in the dictionary? But I feel like the fact that that's so almost like mundane makes it a much more believable story.
Yeah. Again, the time apart, the fact that it wasn't like a big dramatic thing. It was like, no, the phone moved, and I don't know how it moved, and I don't know why it moved, and it freaked me out, and I hung up on my wife, and I ran away.
So a really hardcore skeptic could be like, that is the most desperate way out of an uncomfortable conversation.
Sure.
Can't talk, the phone's haunted. Click. You know?
I'm going to put that in my back pocket. I'm going to save that one. That's a strong play. Ghosts are afoot. I got to go. So that's one.
My husband has watched too much Scooby-Doo to ever fall for that.
So that's one. My wife would be like, well, I'm coming over to look at it.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, no, I really gotta go. So the other occurrence. This one is more like, I don't want to say normal, because both are weird, right? But when you hear about ghost stories, very rarely is it an object moved on its own, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like next level. If we were watching Ghostbusters, Ray Stantz would be like, man, we got a class 3, whatever, transmutation.
I was literally about to say, in the laboratory vetted movie Ghost, that's very difficult.
Which was a documentary filmed in real time. So, the other occurrence. This one's even more widespread. This happens on the grounds, out in the public area. Mm-hmm. This happens in the Capitol building, and this also occurs in the other buildings. And that is a shadowy figure has been seen.
Okay. Are we talking? Well, no, keep going.
Like a full body silhouette shadow has been observed, moving like a person, then vanishing.
Okay. I am distressed because that is something that I experienced once.
Including on camera.
No.
Yep.
Where can we watch this?
We can't, but it's in the book.
Okay.
It's a bit of a believe me, bro kind of moment in the book where it's like, and then we reviewed the footage and there was definitely something there. I'm like, where is it? It's like, can't do police business.
Please.
But so I went over there knowing that. I specifically went over there and was like, well, let me see where these cameras are. They're everywhere.
Really?
Yes. And it's very well lit, and there's cameras. I'm referring to the outside thing, where one guy was like, I saw a thing, and he like ran out there. He was like, all right, you come around the other end. And then what they thought was a person was gone, so they went back inside and were like, show us the footage. And it was a shadowy figure just looped out of existence when the other guy came around the corner.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It also appears inside the Capitol building itself, specifically in the old House chamber, pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. And you may be asking yourself, why this building?
I am actually wondering that.
We've been doing this long enough that I know where the questions are going to come. This could go into a whole, what is a haunting? What is a ghost? Is it residual energy of some sort, like on a loop? Is it an actual spirit? Is it that our perception of time isn't necessarily accurate and it's actually an event playing out in its time that we just happen to see through some thin veil of physics that I can't explain because I'm not a physicist? And we'll go into a group discussion on that in a bit.
Okay.
Time willing. But for the sake of time, let's go that it ties into some kind of tragedy. Because a lot of times these stories tie into a tragedy, right? Like, this person was murdered here, now their ghost haunts it, or something like that. On Wednesday, April 27th, in 1870, people gathered in the Virginia State Capitol building to hear the court's decision on a case. Hundreds of people overpacked the Capitol's second floor courtroom, located directly above the Hall of Delegates.
Okay.
At around 11 o'clock, the session convened, and the balcony fell.
Oh.
They overpacked it. 350 people fell into the chamber floor.
You are kidding.
Yeah.
In the state capitol.
Yep. On the balcony. Yeah.
Onto a marble floor, one presumes.
Onto other people.
Yeah.
So there were 62 deaths
in
the Capitol building, and approximately 120 others were injured.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a pretty high casualty count for a court session.
That's how you get some ghosts.
Yes. Gosh, yeah.
It's a real quick way to get some ghosts. This is completely informal polling. Participate as you want. I'm just trying to read the room. You can tell me shut up. I don't want to raise my hand. By show of hand, who thinks that ghosts are something stuck on replay, like a residual energy? We can't interact with them. Yeah? That's me. I buy into that kind of. Who thinks it's an actual disembodied spirit of a deceased person? All right, that's a popular one. Who thinks that our perception of time is inaccurate and we could be actually looking at some sort of thin veil? Okay, we got that too. The point is, we don't know. We can think about it, and it's really fun to talk about and explore. But I'm not going to claim to say what any of that is. I just know that a tragedy happened in that building, and now there's supposedly ghosts.
Do you have time for a what if?
Yeah, sure.
The shadow person. I think my explanation for it would be this. Regardless of the policy decisions made, regardless of the times, regardless of who is elected or in what era, everything decided in that building probably was decided fairly contentiously, probably with a strong sense on all parties of what if we had chosen the other way. With any bill that comes up, any law.
You mean the government doesn't always agree?
Right. And what if all the doubt that people have about the decision that has just been made over the course of centuries seeps into these stone walls and eventually comes to life as the thing that in the night will run around and taunt anyone it can find as the opposite of a person, because it is the embodiment of the opposite of all decision and intention.
Speaking of Ghostbusters 2, the slime in the sewers is bad because it absorbs New York's bad energy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so I buy that.
There we go.
I like it. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's rip up some tickets.
Yes.
Before we move on to the next story, we will raffle that book off. I'm going to go get it out of my backpack. Please bear with me. And even if you don't win the book, we have a table out in the hall where we're giving away t-shirts, koozies,
buttons.
I think we're out of buttons. Stickers, postcards, trading cards. All kinds of stuff. So if you like this kind of thing and you want a freebie, we have a ton of it out in the hall. It's literally free. There is no catch. Story 2.
Yeah, story 2. Wow, we are knocking them out.
Yeah, well, I want to have time to just chit-chat.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah. That's great. Right, if it were me, we would still be sitting here 4 hours from now, and I wouldn't have actually started the first one.
Yeah, so for the folks that haven't been familiar with Arcane Carolinas before, there's basically 2 episode formats. You're either getting a Charlie episode or a Michael episode. And if you're getting a Michael episode, there's a lot of history. Now, I like history, so I make sure that I have a full cup of coffee. Yeah. I've got my second drink, which is usually like a water or something, and I block out a little extra time for that one.
The Michael episode is just like buckle up and then get ready at the end, because I'm going to say it's all real.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And you're experiencing a Charlie episode, so take that for what you will. We talk about flag boobs.
Well, yeah,
we talk
there you
about
go.
state mottos. We talk about ghosts.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And another thing, if you're not familiar with our show, we do keep it PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we know that some of our listeners are younger kids.
One of the very first emails we got was from somebody talking about how they listened to it with their grandchild, and we were like, "Oh, we can never cuss."
Yeah, and there's certain stories that we won't do. We're not a true crime podcast. Like, we won't get into super gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Hollywood Cemetery Vampire, sometimes called the Richmond Vampire. Does anybody know this one? All right, I got a couple. Awesome. So we got a couple kindas out there, and I got a bunch of "what are you talking about" looks. So, mixed bag. All right, here we go. Richmond.
Vampires are very in my wheelhouse.
So it's called the Hollywood Cemetery Vampire because it is said to reside in Hollywood Cemetery, a 130-acre cemetery established in Richmond in 1860.
Wow. I love it.
Yeah. So there's 2 versions of this legend floating around.
Okay.
And I should say that when researching this, it was pretty wild how much I found. It gets reposted everywhere.
Sure.
On blogs. There was a band, I'm pretty sure it was a band called Richmond Vampire. And I was like, that's a great name for a band. And they had like a little demo cassette that they had done, and the cover was Nosferatu.
Oh, neat.
Like, it was really cool. I didn't listen to it, but I was like, it looks really cool.
Good on them.
Yeah. So the first version of the story goes that there is an Egyptian and Masonic-styled mausoleum with the name W.W. Poole and the date 1913 in Hollywood Cemetery, and it holds a vampire.
I love it already.
Now, you can go there today, and it's there.
Really?
Yeah. And the W and the W are said to resemble vampire fangs.
Oh, I love it.
Which is pretty funny. Like, if I'm a vampire, people need to know.
Oh, if I ever become a vampire, I'm going to leave a trail of cheesy hallmarks everywhere. You wouldn't be able to drive across town without knowing it.
So the story goes, W.W. Poole is the actual vampire. And he was run out of England in the late 1800s and fled to the U.S. Again, Nosferatu style in a box. Whatever.
Yeah.
But was somehow contained and interned in this mausoleum. Bricked up, he continues to cast a shadow of fear, and it is said that sometimes he can be seen roaming the cemetery late at night looking for a victim.
Oh, so in this version, is he imprisoned in the tomb?
It starts that way, but then he can like get out, and it's just kind of his house.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
It's a very small house. It's cozy. That's the word. If it was an Airbnb, it would say cozy.
Yeah, I mean, it would be $1,400 a month, I'm sure.
So, all 20 square feet of it. The other version, we've talked a bit about this in other episodes, railroad disasters, like genuine, real-life, verifiable railroad disasters, happened a lot.
Yeah.
Over the course of not just like industrial revolution and railroad expansion, but well into the 20th century with the use of chain gangs and basically conscripted labor where conditions were just awful. The other version ties into something like that, where the Church Hill Railroad Tunnel in Richmond collapsed in 1925.
Okay.
And it is said that it collapsed because during it being rehabilitated, rebuilt, repaired, however you want to put it, had fallen into disuse and it was being rebuilt. The construction unearthed an ancient evil creature.
Ooh.
The vampire.
Ooh.
Had jagged teeth and a blood-soaked visage. It crawled from the wreckage of the collapse and fled to the river, where it was pursued by railroad workers, where it further fled several miles to the cemetery, vanishing into the W.W. Poole Mausoleum, which was left sealed for fear of waking it again.
Oh, I like that a lot. So you imagine that, like, at some point in the past, some band of plucky vampire hunters had bested this vampire, buried him in the side of a mountain, said, nobody's ever going to bother this. We're good. Peace out. And then 50 years later, whatever, somebody comes along digging a railroad tunnel. They hit the pocket where he's buried.
Yep.
It caves in. He drains everybody working on it dry. Walks.
Yep.
I like it.
Runs.
Flees. Flaps.
Flaps. Moves flappingly.
Yes.
But here's where it gets interesting. So this is the part of the episode where we get into the real history. The first version is said to be an oral tradition, a little bit of local folklore that started popping up first in the 1960s, but it really took off after an article was written in the Commonwealth Times in 1976. So they wrote a little article about it, like, this is the legend the kids are telling each other. And then everybody
kids
just
those
like
days.
took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about a mausoleum with a name and a date. It's got a real person in it. It's very easily traceable.
That's pretty easy research.
Yeah, so William Wortham Poole, born April 1842, died February 1922, which is not 1913.
No.
Yeah. He was a bookkeeper. He was born in Mississippi, the son of Samuel Poole and Nancy Rose Wortham. And in the 1860s, he moved to Virginia, where he took bookkeeping and clerical jobs. And he stayed here until he died. In between then, he married someone named Alice Perdue in 1866. They were married. They had 4 children. His wife was from Richmond originally, and he died at the age of 80 of pneumonia, at which point he was interned in Hollywood Cemetery in his family mausoleum. And it says 1913 because it's the family mausoleum, and his wife died in 1913 and was interned at that point.
I was going to ask if it said 1913 because that was the first time he died.
Ooh, that would have been way cooler and less sad to talk about. And their bodies have since been removed from the mausoleum and relocated. That's how bad the urban legend got.
Oh, yeah, gosh.
So, like, ancestors? How many generations do you have to be removed to be an ancestor?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Ancestors removed them.
Descendants.
Descendants, that's better.
If ancestors had removed him, we'd really be cooking with the vampire story.
Oh, right. Thank you. Welcome to a Charlie episode in which I trip over my words. And don't worry, once we publish this, I'll get a lot of emails about it.
I'm in the middle of having another book edited, so I'm used to having to think like that. Don't worry.
There you go. If you have any hateful words you want to send, please do it via email to arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. I do read them. I don't reply most of the time. Occasionally I'll offer the person a sticker. The second version is a bit more tragic.
Okay.
Because that's just a life well lived, right? The guy lived to 80.
Yeah, I mean...
That's a full life. He had a good run.
Born in the early 19th century and lived to 80. That's doing pretty good.
He had a good run. The other one In 1925, to add capacity to the Churchill Tunnel, the C&O Railroad began efforts to restore it to a usable condition after a period of disuse. On October 2nd, while repairs were underway, a work train was trapped by a tunnel collapse of 150 feet of tunnel. So 150 feet of tunnel fell on this train.
Gosh.
This was located below Jefferson Park, close to the intersection of North 18th Street and East Marshall, if you want to check it out. If you're into that, please don't trespass, but you can go look at the tunnel. It's bricked up. According to research conducted by somebody named Gregory Maitland, an urban legend and folklore researcher who is based here in Virginia, the creature that escaped the Churchill Tunnel collapse was actually the 28-year-old railroad fireman Benjamin F. Mosby, who was working on the train. Like a fireman at that point, a railroad fireman, somebody that like works on the boiler.
Yeah, the person who's like making the fire. Yeah,
it's pretty literal. It's on the nose. The fireman. What do you do? It's in the name. Are you the kind that puts things out or makes them? Oh, I make them. Sometimes the ones that put them out do make them though.
That's true.
There's a high unsolved mysteries always used to be. Then this mysterious fire, blah, blah, blah. Turns out it was a firefighter. Anyway, Mr. Mosby had been shoveling coal into the firebox of the steam locomotive on the work train. He had no shirt on. The cave-in occurs and the boiler explodes all over him.
Ouch.
So he is scalded, his teeth are broken, and he makes his way out of the tunnel in complete shock with his skin hanging off of him.
Oh.
And blood coming out of his mouth and all that. And he ran straight for the water.
Yeah.
They kept him alive long enough to get him to Grace Hospital, but he died. And he is oddly, in fact, buried in Hollywood Cemetery.
Really?
Yeah. You can visit his grave.
Huh.
The second version is interesting because it can be tracked to blogs in the early 2000s. There being a vampire wasn't enough.
Right.
They had to make it extra evil and gory. So they just tacked on this actual incident, and it was a monster.
The second version is the Rob Zombie remake of the first version.
Exactly. Yep. So there it is. Richmond vampires. Two tales. Both urban legends with a smidge of history mixed in, but for the most part, just a fun, spooky story.
And so the first version, the guy didn't actually get run out of England. He just emigrated.
Yeah, no, he was born in Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what I said, right? Let me check my notes.
I might have misheard.
Yeah, Mississippi.
Oh, yeah. Which is like immigrating.
Depends on which side of the river.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right, and if you'd like to send it, because this recording will be released later, if you're listening in Mississippi and would like to send hate mail, you can do that to arcanecarolinas@gmail.com.
And I will respond.
Yeah, you usually respond to that. So we got about 9 minutes till we need to clear out of here so the next person can come in and set up. We did the ghost talk.
Yeah.
Do you want to open it up for any comments or...
Sure.
What I was thinking was, does anybody have any favorite Richmond ghost stories or monster stories that you want to yell out the name about? No is also an acceptable answer.
Or favorite stories from other places.
Sure.
So I grew up in the foster care system, and I don't know if it was actually anything paranormal or not, but weirdly enough, I was in a group home and we were watching The Grudge. You know that season where, that scene where the Grudge crawls through the window after creaking the window open? Mm-hmm. Well, right as she was creaking the window open, the window behind the chair I was sitting in decided it was going to creak open.
Oh.
And that was in Stanton, Virginia.
Yeah, no thanks. That'd be enough for me to go sit somewhere else.
Now, weirdly enough, the owner of the house, who owned the house before it was a group home, now this you can actually look up. We found out that the grandmother who had adopted the granddaughter, parents died in a car crash, and killed the granddaughter and then hung herself from that window.
Ooh. See, that goes back to what I was talking about, how you can often... Thank you for sharing that,
yes,
by the way.
Thank you.
I think that's interesting because it goes back to that whole, how do we tie these stories to history is often tragedy. It doesn't have to be, though.
We've talked before that a lot of times folklore is the digestive organ of tragedy. Folklore is how people process it. It's how the story gets kept alive so that people know what it is that happened. But also it's a way to also keep it at a remove so that you can deal with it. I mean, what you're telling us is not folklore because it's something that happened to you. But a lot of times when you look at these stories, it's a way to process something really awful.
Yeah. it's also a way for us to process what I was driving at was how to process. So if I'm sitting there and the window happens, I'm like, oh, that's the grandma.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's the way I process the weird stuff that I can't explain, where I'm like, oh, I can ascribe to that. And now I can accept that.
Oh.
It's the weird way of like, I might not know exactly what happened, but it's how I can process it.
See, I think a difference in our mindsets is that I don't even see that as processing. I'm just like, obviously, that is fact. If I had that poster behind Mulder, it would just say, I already believe. Just tell me,
Well, thank you for coming to our Richmond talk. This was a new one for us. We haven't done Virginia before. We'll be back at 10:30 in E22 to do a Fairfax story that is, I worked on it real late last night, and then I found something, and then I had to work on it again this morning. Mm-hmm. So it should be a fun one.
Excellent.
I think it's a fun one.
Sounds good to me.
The Bunny Man. Thank you. We have lots of free stuff outside.
And now we are recording.
All right. Hello and welcome back to an Arcane Carolinas case files. This is not case files. But see, right off the bat, we have to edit. Hello and what we haven't done in Arcane Destinations in a year.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. It's been a really long time. But that's what this is. This is an Arcane Destinations episode. We, back in February 2023, we went up to Richmond, Virginia, and did some Virginia stories. And in the aftermath of that, we were talking to our buddy Jerry, who I will refer to as our field correspondent from Virginia. And he had some knowledge of some of the stories that we were talking about, as well as some more to share. And I was like, you know what? That's perfect. Let's save this. Let's wait till we get a chance to talk to Jerry, and we'll make it a Destinations episode for the fall.
I think that now would be an excellent time for us to introduce ourselves and then let Jerry introduce himself.
You can tell that we haven't recorded in a while because we're all out of order. Hi, I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I've been doing a lot of editing, so I was sitting there like, okay, this is going great so far. I am your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist, Michael G. Williams.
I'm Jerry Chandler. I've grown up and lived around Central Virginia for most of my life, and I'm a huge fan of ghost stories and the paranormal. More than anything else, I love kind of like the cultural histories and the histories around them, but I do come at it from the perspective of a skeptic.
But I'm betting not a dogmatic skeptic.
Oh, no, my concept of skeptic is I am always open to anything if I find the proof.
I love it. I heard somebody at Dragon Con one time describe that exact distinction of somebody who believes that nothing is real versus somebody who is open to whatever is happening as an uppercase S skeptic and a lowercase s skeptic.
If you can prove to me that there's a monster in Loch Ness, I will be the happiest little child in the world again.
I read an interesting thing online recently about, because we get accused is such a strong word.
Accused.
Right. Been labeled a debunker on some things, right? And the description that I read kind of lines up with what we just talked about. I don't view this show or myself as a debunker, because I think if you're out to debunk something, you're coming in with a preconceived notion, as opposed to saying, let's make it happen. Make me believe. Show me. And I think there's a distinct difference there.
Absolutely.
I'll defend you somewhat from the debunker label with a very easy one. I loved one of the episodes, and I'm just now suddenly blanking on the topic. But you were looking, the specific name, you were looking at a story of this ghostly apparition, and there was the woman and the man, and you were going back and back, and you ended up finding the research that said, well, like 20 or so years before the story started, this was actually like a short story or something that this one writer had done. And eventually it picked up and it became the ghost story. And the fact that you do that, I appreciate that, because the more you eliminate the things that are false evidence, the more you narrow it down to things that this is unexplained, maybe it should be looked at more. If that
I
makes
appreciate
sense.
that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And the needle on my UFO discussion-o-meter is like starting to rev up. So, and I know that's not what we're here to talk about today. So I'm gonna say, Jerry, why don't you tell us a story about the Virginia Capitol Complex?
Okay. Virginia Capitol Complex. The Capitol was designed in 1785 by Thomas Jefferson. We actually also have the Executive Mansion in Richmond near the Capitol, which was built in 1813. I specify these dates because a lot of people forget that we have the originals in Jamestown.
Oh,
You know what'll be? I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. What'll be interesting is, so we talked about the complex a little bit in the stuff that we recorded February, and I got to tell you, I am really foggy on what I remember. So this is great. Now I'm like, man, I hope I got my stuff right.
But the Capitol complex is more or less in the center of downtown, and that entire area, you could kind of say it's been a little unlucky over the decades and the centuries, although it's kind of law of averages because of how many people are down there. You have stories in and around the Capitol complex of hauntings and ghosts due to tragedies, due to mundane deaths, and then due to just, I don't know if this would be mundane or not. There's a building on the edge of the Capitol complex. It's known for its hauntings. Currently, it's a state office building. It started its life as the Hotel Richmond. The Hotel Richmond was part of the Murphy Hotel complex, which was right there on Broad Street, which is the main strip going through town. When you were up there for a GalaxyCon, a block away from the convention center, that main road was Broad Street.
so
And
was
that
Broad
runs-
Street the big 4-6 lane road that we walked across anytime we went anywhere?
Yeah, if you went out and went south,
It was a big road.
Yeah.
Now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah,
and there was
okay.
that big road right in front of the hotel and the steakhouse and all. That's
Yeah.
Broad Street, and that literally runs east-west through the entirety of the city.
You know what's funny? You mentioned the steakhouse, and we actually stood in front of that steakhouse and read the menu. Walked back. We're like, oh no, we can't swing that.
No. I was like, let's go get nachos.
You can't throw a rock and not hit some place that has good food.
Yeah, that's one of the draws, and that's actually always been one of the draws to downtown, which goes back to the Hotel Richmond. So perfectly segued back in. But Hotel Richmond, there are old stories depending on the area you're in. Some of them are true, some of them are urban legend drawn from the areas that are true. There was a thing where people, if they couldn't afford the cost of a funeral, they didn't want to burden their family way back in the day. I don't want to call it a scam, but they kind of started doing a scam. They knew they were close to death. They'd rent a hotel room in a really nice hotel. And Hotel Richmond was very nice. It was right on the corner of the Capitol Square. It was right in the heart of all the areas, the business stuff and the show stuff. So everybody came there. It had a good reputation. And one thing it didn't want attached to its reputation was, my uncle died in the Hotel Richmond.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of these hotels, until it became really frequent and they started catching on, were like, if you don't tell anyone, we'll cover the death costs. So
Wow.
people would do it deliberately.
Oh.
Whether they were really good at guessing the timing and hitting that 2-week stay just perfect, or there was a little help getting there, don't know, but people would do this. And so you actually had a lot of people die in the Hotel Richmond. Not like massive numbers, but that has led to, over the years in the office building, has now become, you get like random ghost stories that don't seem to make any sense. Somebody's working security, or there's an employee working late at night, and they say that they saw someone on the 7th floor, and it's just this old man who was standing outside one of the rooms, and they're like, hey, what are you doing here? And the person just walks into a room. They walk there, they look into the room, and all of these old hotel rooms converted into offices, so they don't go anywhere. You're now looking at an empty room, and you know you just saw somebody.
I love that. We talk about haunted hotels as a genre, right? It's decidedly a genre of hauntings. And the fact that you knew that was a place that people would go to die on purpose, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that contributes overall nationally, not just in Richmond, but that's fascinating.
It makes me think about the times we've talked about the idea that nobody dies at Disney World. Because if anybody dies at Disney World, they are relocated before they are declared dead.
Yeah, like the Pink Lady.
And it makes me wonder, do theme parks have more ghosts than we realize? Things like that.
The Haunted Mansion isn't just like mirrors and lights.
What if the Haunted Mansion is where the ghosts were?
I was just at Carowinds, and they have the little icy stands where you can get the little like cherry icy. What if you got stuck haunting an icy stand because it got wheeled over to where your final place was?
I'd be
a
into
bummer.
that. frankly.
You'd be into that? I'd be a little bummed.
I'd be okay with it.
I want to be on a ride.
No, I'm good.
Whee!
But yeah, no, I've heard tons of stories about ghosts at Disney, and some of my fellow volunteers actually work for Disney, and I have heard so many stories from them over the years. So
Ooh, interesting. Well, there you go, Michael.
Yeah, there we go. We're doing Arcane Destinations Florida. Then we know what to talk about.
Well, we'll get sued. Ghosts of Disney episode will be our first DMCA strike.
Yes.
a famous undisclosed amusement park in Central Florida near a town called, I think it's Oreo or something. But no, the Hotel Richmond's right on the corner of Capitol Square. So it's in that immediate area. That's the mundane type of deaths. Some of the more tragic, a block off of Capitol Square, across Broad Street from Capitol Square. Now you've got this giant building. It's part of the VCU medical complex. I believe at one point it was dorms. I think it's gone back to being dorms for the medical students again. But back in 1811, that was one of the major theaters in Richmond, and it was the place to be. It was only about 5 or 6 years old in 1811 when this happened, but it was the place to be. You went. They had multiple levels of balcony seating. They had a nice section in the bottom that wrapped right around the stage. You could get right up and see all the players doing their thing. And one December, I think it was like right around Christmas, I think it was December 25th or 26th, they were doing a play and somebody pulled the wrong rope. And instead of opening up this or doing whatever, they took one of the chandeliers all the way to the roof. And this is 1811. The chandeliers are candles and oil lamps. Well, the decorations in here are the old tapestry that they would run in that really nice way going all around the theater. And of course, the brick outside of the theater is fairly fire resistant. The inside is all wood. As they were doing the play, one of the actors afterwards in the Richmond newspaper talks about they didn't realize it was burning until they actually started getting burning ash coming down. And they realized that when they were on the stage. By the time they realized it, the ceiling is on fire, the tapestries are on fire, it starts actually really roaring. The theater could hold 600 people total, and it was almost a packed house.
Oof.
There was only one stairwell going up to get to all of those second, third level, fourth level seats. And being pre-fire code safety regulations, that one stairwell wasn't strong enough to handle tons of panicked people all on it at one time. Stairwell collapses, trapping most people in the upper level. Some of them just kind of dove down as best they could. Some people actually jumped out the windows. Amazingly, while there were a huge number of injuries, there was only about, and I hear different numbers depending on the reporting, but they all lock into about the range of 70 to 75 deaths. One of the deaths being one of those, for any of you history trivia buffs, George William Smith, who was supposed to be the governor of Virginia, who got elected in November of 1811 and died in the fire in December of 1811. Our governors are sworn in January. So
he didn't even make it.
Yeah. So
his benefits hadn't even kicked in yet.
Right.
But over the years, over the decades, as other businesses or other buildings had been put in that area, it falls into more one of those weird memory hauntings or recording hauntings, however they call it.
Oh, like a stone tape theory kind of thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen is you would have people working at one time there was a bank building there, and they would start panicking on one of the floors. And this is like 100 years later, to the point they're calling Richmond Fire, hey, something's burning, because the entire floor is so strong an odor of burning wood or burning materials.
Right.
That they're absolutely convinced part of their building is on fire. And Richmond Fire shows up. There's nothing burning outside. There's no sign of smoke. They go in. Everything's fine. Smell was gone. And that had reportedly happened multiple times across the decades. I think the last time like there was anything documented where Richmond fire was actually called there was like late 60s, early 70s. So it hasn't happened in some time. But that was one of those things where you're on a side of this horrendous tragedy with all of these deaths, and late night workers or sometimes heavy load work days, people would start reporting that smell of fire. And these are the type of things that happen all around downtown Richmond. So it kind of unlucky, but law of averages, you got a ton of people down there, but the Capitol Square is centered right in there. So then we get into Capitol Square itself. So looking at the Capitol first, because the really fun one is the mansion, and I'll save that for last. The Capitol building had multiple stories of hauntings, not so much apparitions. There are very few credible stories of apparitions in the Capitol. Mostly it's odd phenomena. People would talk about something on their desk moved, or you'd leave the room and you swore, no, I put this over here. Where did it go? And it wouldn't just be like one person so that you could blame flighty memory.
Right.
2 or 3 people would be like, we had this on the desk right here, and I have no idea where it is now. And then you'd walk in the next day and everybody's like, it's back. What the hell? But my favorite thing, and I'd experienced this with one job I had that occasionally had me having to go into some of these buildings at odd hours of the night, there was a really interesting acoustical phenomena. If you ever go into the Capitol, and they do have tours all week long, it's a lovely building. Come visit it. Most lifelike statue of George Washington that the people that knew him said, that's George, is standing on the second floor. It's a beautiful, as far as just, George isn't a beautiful man. I mean, not for me at least, but as far as an artistic achievement, it's a beautiful statue. Very lifelike. Go and visit it. You can see it. Wonderful place. But if you go, pay attention to the first floor. The north is the back of the building. The south is the front of the building. That's where the portico and all the columns are. The east door and the west door are the two sides. When you go in to the east door on the first floor, you can see the entire length of the Capitol all the way to the west door. It's just one giant hallway with rooms on either side. If you happen to have been working in any of those rooms doing stuff late at night, you would start hearing what sounded like footsteps, and it would happen fairly often, and it would always be in that corridor. And the interesting thing about it was you get used to hearing people walking in buildings like this, and modern shoes, softer soles. This would always sound like a harder material, almost like wood tapping on the floor.
Yeah.
So you would hear this click, 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 and it would have the cadence of someone walking. And a lot of times I'm in there and somebody else is with me. We're doing some stuff and like, okay, that's one of the other guys. We need to get them in here. And it would sound like the footsteps are getting closer. You stick your head out into the hallway and step out, and it's like, hey, and there's nobody there. And as soon as you step out, you can't hear the sound anymore. Now, the fun thing, and I know Tally Johnson, who I've met here and there on the convention circuit, now he's been one of your guests. Tally would love this part because I'm pretty sure he'd love being able to dig into this concept. One of the things I'm more willing to entertain right now than actual ghosts is memory imprint haunting. The Capitol building is constructed out of a lot of very interesting materials, like the floor tiles. When you go in, look down, there are fossils in all of the floor tiles. They cut the floor tiles out of a special quarry, imported them from way the hell away, and everything that comes out of this quarry has ancient sea fossils in it. All of the tiles have all this really interesting looking stuff in it. I know somebody who's real into the paranormal, and they talked about how some of these materials are the type of things they talk about with the famous hotel hauntings and things like that, the structures, if not the hotels, the ground around it. We heard it all the time. We don't hear it that much anymore. In 2006, 2007, they had some people come in to check on the structural integrity of the Capitol. because it hadn't had any real renovations since they almost burned it down in the Civil War. And then they added the 2 wings on. The wings are newer attachments. The center is the original. And in doing so, they discovered it was a small miracle it hadn't fallen in on our heads. Major support structures, some of the beams were almost gone. If you look up the Virginia Capitol portico and you see the outside, these giant pillars are holding up this giant roof. And the pillars were basically trees that were cut and shaved. So they made large columns, and they put this metal wrap around them so you could paint it and make it look all nice. And apparently all the wood kind of turned to dust.
Oops.
So, yeah. So it's like they were having major freakouts. They get in. They literally took almost everything apart. You had the frame of the Capitol, essentially, and they boxed it up. They were very precise. They actually numbered the hundreds of tiles that were on the floor.
They
had
put some
a map,
flex tape on it.
Yeah,
They used
so
some,
they could. Yeah, well, actually, almost. You're right. They numbered the tiles. They put a tape on them. They pulled the tiles up. They had a map so they could bring it back, put everything back in place. But they did change the layout of the first floor. This process took about 2 years, and the historical committee was so strict about what you could throw away. They literally dug up dirt in Capitol Square, put it in containers, and sent it to storage. And then when they were ready to put everything back, they brought the dirt back and put the dirt back in Capitol Square.
Dirt.
Bureaucracy, you got to love it. When they put all of it back together, and they upgraded the electrical, they upgraded the internal air and all, you stopped hearing this acoustic phenomena. And like I said, I'm really much more willing to give it credit to being something like an imprint haunting with the sounds and all. I know some guys that are deep into paranormal, and they will talk about how the energy imprints on that place. Now, skeptical position, they upgraded all of this stuff, including the air and the heat. The old system, you might have been hearing knocking noises as the hot or the cold was traveling down the system. And then the metal gets to the point where it's even temperature all the way across. You stop getting the knocking. My friends have pointed out when they did all of this stuff, taking it apart, even though they tried to put it back together exactly the way it was, putting as much of the decorations and the tiles and everything back in place, between adding new parts to the Capitol, changing some of the floor plan, and then having taken it all apart and moving it into these separate storage areas, that broke whatever energy recording there was. So when it comes back, you lose that connection. And if it was a haunting, you've broken whatever energy connection was keeping a ghost there. So it's one of those weird ones where you have multiple explanations that work, whether you're skeptic or paranormal.
Sure.
But we don't get as much reported activity since the reconstruction. So
I like your point about there being multiple ways of explaining it, right? Today I was working on an episode that we're going to do shortly, and I broke down, if you believe that this could be it, if you believe that, this could be it, so on and so forth. I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it.
I don't want to slag on anybody. Like I said, I know a lot of atheists and a lot of skeptics have a horrible reputation because it's like, you believe this because you're an idiot. And I'm just, no, I can't prove it. So if you want to believe it and it's not hurting anybody, have at it. I wish sometimes that I could believe in some things the way other people do, because, oh my God, life would be so much more cooler. The world seems so much more fascinating. But the mansion, okay, we have a ghost in the mansion. It is supposed to be a woman. She is supposed to have quite a sense of humor. We're not 100% sure who she is. There's been a lot of different discussions about this. We don't have a name. Nobody has ever narrowed this down, but the number one belief is that there was a woman who came to one of the Christmas parties. And when she left the Christmas party, freak accident, her carriage tips over on her and she dies in front of the mansion. And apparently she was friends of the governor's family and very much enjoyed the mansion. So she ends up deciding to stay there after she dies. And up to a couple of years ago, even, people have reported seeing this woman in a white taffeta gown standing in one of the windows when nobody should be there. There is a staircase. You go into the main level where there's an area of the mansion you can go in for tours, and you actually pass these two stairwells. One of the stairs has a large mirror near it, and huge numbers of people, from the staff to members of the executive families to people that have gone in just to do maintenance work, have claimed that when they're on that stairwell, they look in the mirror, there's a woman behind them. And the first thing you do, when you think you're in some place alone and you see somebody behind you in the mirror, you whip your head around and there's nobody on the stairwell. And then when they look back, there's nobody in the mirror anymore. And that in particular has happened to a lot of the staff over the years, the cleaning staff, butlers, cooks, things like that. One of the screwiest mansion stories came out of, it was like late 70s, early 80s. There was a security detail in the mansion, because our executive mansion, and pay attention to the keyword historians out there, because a lot of people get it wrong. We have the oldest continually used executive mansion in Virginia. People kind of drop that continually used, and there's, oh, this is the oldest mansion in Virginia. Well, no, we got one in Jamestown that's older, but it's also or the United States. There are executive mansions in other states that are older than our current one. The Virginia executive mansion is the oldest continually used, meaning it's been in use as an actual executive mansion, not just a landmark, since it was built. So we've actually had First Family that have talked about weird experiences. Some of the first ladies have talked about, they get it on their children's backsides. It's like, I told you to put your clothes up. You can't just throw it all over your bed like that. And the kids are like, we didn't. And then they'd go on a vacation, or they'd leave for the weekend and go somewhere. And when they came back, mom knows, because she had dragged the kids, come out of your room, we're leaving. And they know what the room looked like when they left, and they come back and the clothes are out of the top drawer thrown over the beds, and nobody's been in there. So odd stuff like that would happen. But the 70s, 80s, there was a security detail, and one of the guys from the security detail was walking around late at night, and he knows there shouldn't be anybody else where he was at. He's in this big open section. It's not an area where if you open a door, you're going to feel a really hard breeze hit you. It's not an area where there's enough close together stuff to where a really ambitious house spider is going to create a massive web. He's walking through, and he just got this weird sensation like, I'm not alone. He stops, he's looking around, and when he came back in the next day to turn in the rest of his equipment and his 2 weeks notice, he claimed, no, that's true, I'm not joking. He claimed when he was standing there, he felt a hand press against his cheek and then stroke the jawline down, leaving off the chin, like someone caressing him. And he did. And I would give credibility to his story that he believes this happened, because he did what I think most people would do, rather than just the kind of, oh, that's weird, I think I'm going to look around some more. He did a very good impersonation of Wile E. Coyote. He left a giant cloud of smoke. He found the closest other member of the security detail. Here's the gun, my gun, here's my badge, here's my ID, here's this. Tell the guy in charge, I'll bring the rest of it in tomorrow. I can't do this. I'm out. No. And he quit the next day, said he would not go back into those buildings, and turned all of his stuff in. My personal experience in the building isn't that crazy, but it's kind of funny. Friend and I are having to go through, they were doing work on the mansion, and we were just going through and making sure everything was shut down for the evening, and make sure everything's set up and nothing's been left on, no hazards, no smoke, no whatever. So we go in, and the main front doors, if you look at a picture of Virginia Executive Mansion, there's these two big green doors on the front. And you have to close one of them and secure it in order to close the other. So we close the main one first, and we go ahead and we latch the second one, and it's locked. So we're walking around and we're checking on all of this stuff and making sure everything's covered and blah, blah. And we get back to the main center area and we look over and the one door is wide open to the outside. And my friend's name was Paul. And I looked at Paul, and of course, being a jerk, I have to give him all sorts of grief because he's the one that locked the door. And it's like, come on, you don't know how to lock a door. You're already in your 30s. Come on, let's go over. And I go over and lock the door and probably made a few more sarcastic remarks that made me feel really stupid shortly after that. Door's locked. Okay, we get back to the main area so that we can then shift off to the other spot. And as we get into that main walkway, the door is sitting wide open. So now it's Paul's turn to give me grief. So we go over and we shut the door, give it a good shove. Okay, it's shut. So we head on. We're doing the check of the rest of the area, making sure this done, that done, this is covered. They didn't leave this. Good, cool. Get back into the main section, and the door is sitting wide open again. Now, Paul, he was actually new to the country, new to his citizenship. He was from the Isle of Man. And he used to talk about like everything in the Isle of Man is haunted. And he grew up with different types of customs and beliefs about the paranormal. And he does something that I didn't get at first, but he walks to the door and he starts talking out loud as he's walking towards the door. And he's literally saying, okay, that was good. You got us. It's funny. It was a great joke. You got one over on us. He shuts the door and he's locking it. And he's looking up at the, just kind of looking up in general. Hey, do us a favor. It was a great joke. And I admit it was funny. You got us. But we got to finish our work. So be nice. Let us finish. And I'm looking at him like, yeah, okay, Paul. We spent another 45 minutes shutting the place up again after he acknowledges the joke. And supposedly the ghost has a sense of humor. That's one of the things about that's been said about the ghost, that it's got a sense of humor. It likes to pull pranks.
Got jokes.
He acknowledges the prank and the door stops opening. Now, this was February. And again, my brain was like trying to grab other stuff. Well, it's February. The heat's on inside. It's freezing cold outside. We've had rain. Very old framework, wood door, things flex and change and shift and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but I will admit that one's harder for me to rationalize.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it stops when Paul acknowledges that she got us. It's good. It's a good one. You got us. 1972, we had a massive hurricane, and the name of the hurricane just went right out of my head, and I forgot to put the name in my notes.
No worries.
But it was like about 1972 or so, we had like one of the major hurricanes come through. Power gets wiped out all throughout downtown Richmond, all the surrounding areas. Tens and tens of thousands of people, no power. People around Capitol Square were kind of freaking out because there's a lamp in one of the windows that the one ghost is supposedly seen in. This is 72. This is not LEDs. This is not portable, rechargeable, whatever. It's old style bulbs, old style lamp plugged into the wall. And that light stayed on the entire time.
Nice.
Woo, I like that one.
I like that a lot.
I think it was Hurricane Agnes or Tropical Storm Agnes, whichever it was. But yeah, that one's a regular one told by the Ghost Tour, which can I throw 2 plugs in for people that might want to visit the area?
Totally.
And for you guys, if you come back through beyond the offer I gave of, hey, I'd be more than happy to show you some really cool stuff. Yeah. We have several in downtown Richmond. We have several growing businesses. They do the ghost tours. And one of them is literally called just the Richmond Ghost Tours. And if you want to get your steps in, they start on Main Street, not too far away from where the Edgar Allan Poe Museum is, which also is supposedly haunted. And not just by the descendants of his cats, who, if you ever go to the museum, the cats will insist that you are there to see them and not anything else. But they'll start there. They go all around, not just the Capitol complex. They hit all these different places. They give the history of them. They give the ghost stories of them. It's a wonderful way to kill a little time, and it's not very expensive. And the other thing, if anybody wants to know more about the ghost stories for downtown Richmond and the surroundings, the old classic standby is we had a writer who's had a ton of books, or been part of compilations. He's L.B. Taylor, Ghost of Richmond. He and others have contributed to a series called Ghosts of Virginia, which I think is up to like 12 volumes. Covers all the ghosts of the Old Dominion. And there's also a really good one dealing specifically with the Capitol complex. Deals with state employees, deals with security personnel, deals with police encounters. It's called Policing the Paranormal by Paul Hope. And that
we gave a copy of that away, actually, at GalaxyCon. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Was Paul there for that?
No, he was not. Funny story. I had it on my Amazon wish list to do research, and I got it twice. So then I gave a copy. I gave one of the copies away rather than return.
It's actually a pretty good book, and it's going to be more current than some of the Ghosts of Richmond, Ghosts of Virginia, because I think he got it published in like 2015, 2017. Mm-hmm. So some of the stories are fairly current, and Paul is actually the Paul from Isle of Man.
Oh,
so
I made that connection as soon as you said it. As soon as you said it, because I had read the book, I was just like, that's the guy.
Yeah, some of the way he comes at talking about the ghost stories that he interviewed these people about, he comes at it from that perspective of having that slightly different cultural view on it because of where he grew up. So it's actually a really fun read.
No, it's a great read. I plug the heck out of it on the episode. Thank you for being willing to come on here and be our local expert, Jerry. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for asking me to come on.
All right. Hello and welcome to Arcane Carolinas live at GalaxyCon Richmond. I am your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I am your co-host who feels very uncomfortable saying this in front of people other than Charlie, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's how I start every episode. Multi-award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
Thank you for joining us. We know it's late. It's certainly past my bedtime, which is when mistakes start to happen. So if I get something wrong, I am not sorry. It's just what happens when I stay up this late. By a show of hands, who was at the earlier panel that we did today? Okay. The difference between a commonwealth and a state, there isn't any. It's just the way that state's constitution was written at the time that the state was created. They went with that language. It's just an old-timey word for state.
There you go. I feel like philosophically there might be a difference, but, legally, no.
Legally, there is no difference.
Okay.
They have all the same obligations and protections of a state.
Oh, well, settled.
There we go. The other thing from earlier was the history of the state of Virginia, which we'll do like an abbreviated version so you don't have to hear the whole same thing again. But since we do have new people.
Should we describe to people who were not at that what our deal is?
I was about to get to it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
This is the benefit of doing it live. So anyway, Arcane Carolinas is a podcast that covers folklore, myths, legends, even modern weird stories. I would say today's is a modern weird.
Okay.
Or tonight's, this one, is a modern weird. Just urban tales, you know, folklore.
Loclore.
Yeah. Folklore. I like that. That's pretty awesome. What we do not do is we do not pretend to have the secret sauce when it comes to what is a ghost. Where does Bigfoot live? What is the little green man that visits outside my window?
We have not seen Bigfoot. He does not know our names. We don't claim to have the secret truth. We are not paranormal researchers. We love history and folklore.
Yeah, I do not talk to aliens. I wish they would talk to me. No, I don't.
If somebody wanted to pay me to run through the woods chasing Bigfoot, then I would happily do that as long as the paycheck was sufficient. But I would not go into it necessarily on my own.
So, earlier in the day, we did some stories out of Richmond, Virginia, and part of what we do when we do an episode is we give a little bit of historical background on the area. So we talked about the state of Virginia's history. I will not bore you with that if you don't want to hear that. By show of hands, who wants to hear about the history of Virginia? Nobody.
Me, but I was there.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We will jump right into it.
Before we do, to note, every episode, one of us does the research and one of us comes in blind. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Charlie has done all the research.
Fairfax. It's a place in Virginia. It has a local legend that has persisted for many decades known as the Bunny Man. Who knows about the Bunny Man in here? All right. Audience participation time. What's the version of the Bunny Man that you heard? Yep. So for the recording, there's a bridge, sometimes called Bunny Man Bridge. You don't go there because there's a psychopath that escaped from an institution that will kill you.
Usually usually our dynamic is that Charlie is a little more skeptical, and I am like eager to believe, and in fact have decided already to believe. This one might be a little harder for me.
Well, buckle up.
All right.
What version of the Bunny Man have you heard?
Well, it's the same as that, but it was more or less, he would also string up dead rabbits.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I was going to say, does he like wear a bunny suit?
So,
He does wear a bunny suit.
What?
so the version that I know is like basically both of those, but it was the stringing up the bunnies, and then also like that he lived somewhere near the bridge, and I was like, why you don't visit or go there or whatever. It was because he like hung out there.
Yeah, it was a spot, right?
That's his like home base.
Gets off work and goes and sits under the bridge and waits for people to come by.
It's like in King of the Hill, except instead of staying alley out back drinking beer, he goes and kills people under a bridge.
Yeah.
Everybody has their passion project.
So there are so many versions of the Bunny Man story, and we're going to get into that. It's been on TV, in books, on blogs. It's told amongst friends. It's on late night drives going around looking for trouble. Kids will tell it to each other. The bridge is a lot of times a part of it, not always. I first heard of the Bunny Man 19 years ago, when I attended the University of Maryland in College Park, which is right up there on 495, kind of in that Virginia, D.C., Maryland nexus. And Fairfax isn't that far from there.
Sure.
And I was an adventurous young lad that would like to go out in the evening and look for trouble in abandoned buildings and chase down local spooky stories and stuff. And I was told, similar, was like, there's this bridge, and if you go to the bridge, a guy's going to jump out of the woods and throw an axe at you.
Whoa, that's pretty... Like, does he just lie in wait?
Well, right. Well, that was the thing, is we all laughed about it. We're like, we're not driving to Fairfax.
Does he have like an early warning system 2 miles up the road? He's like, oh, hang on, Helen, I got to get on my bunny suit.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the version that I was told. Bunny.
He's got a little bunny mobile and he comes driving out of the cave.
It's actually just a big wheel with like ears hanging off the sides.
Oh my God, I love
He's
it.
just pedaling really fast.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be so great.
So
I'm going to use that in a book now. Okay, I'm just letting you know.
Okay. So I first heard about this around the same time the movie Donnie Darko came out. And so I was like, this is stupid. You're completely making this up just because of that weird bunny dude in Donnie Darko.
That's
no.
exactly where I went.
So, whatever. That's the legend in a nutshell, is that there's so many variations on the legend that no matter who you ask, you're going to get a core story of there's a dude in a bunny suit, maybe. And, and there's extra embroidery around it, depending on who you got the story from.
I would love to see the Venn diagram of bunny men.
Yes, with the overlapping details.
Totally.
But here's the thing. There is a historian archivist that works for the Fairfax County Library named Brian A. Connolly. He compiled 46 verifiable sources and published I would call it a piece of research that would probably take 2 hours to discuss. And we don't have 2 hours, so I'm going to play the hits from this. But we're going to look at the history of the Bunny Man.
46 sources?
46 verifiable sources.
Yeah.
So not blogs, not Wikipedia.
It's not some real estate website.
No, it's...
For whatever reason, we see a lot of legends on real estate websites.
It sells houses.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a tree at the beach in the Outer Banks that a homeowners association has a legend around.
Yeah, right.
To be like, I live in our neighborhood. It's got this tree. That's not the tree. We have an episode about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Fairfax County was a rural and primarily agrarian area well into the 20th century. So first off, there's never been an asylum in Fairfax County. There's
Really?
Yeah, there's never been an asylum in Fairfax County. So the escaped asylum inmate story, which, by the way, is like, it's a trope. It's like, they did it in Halloween.
What if it's like
When the
liquor
bus
stores where I grew up, where it's like just across the county line?
I mean, sure, if you want to stretch.
Yeah.
Sure, get out of here.
Your chain.
And one of the versions has the guy being transferred from the asylum to Lorton Prison as the crux of how he escaped and how the psychopath escaped. Right?
Yeah.
The biggest date that you'll find online is that this happened in 1904. Lorton Prison wasn't built till 1910.
Okay, so that one's busted.
Right. So it kind of pops the balloon of inmate escapee during a transfer. But understanding that folklore and oral tradition is a murky thing and dates and other details get misremembered, let's give grace here because we're only a couple of years off on the prison. This researcher, he combed newspapers from Fairfax County between the dates of 1872 and 1973.
Wow.
So almost 100 years.
Yeah.
Looking for murders.
As one does.
Yeah. So just looking 100 years of papers and records looking for murders. 550 individual mentions of killings.
Oh.
So 550 roughly murders. You whittle those stories down, take elements out, not to diminish them, but like a domestic murder.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Take that out. That obviously can't be the inspiration. There's actually 3 particularly gnarly murders in 1918, 1927, and 1949. This is where I'll break to say we're not a true crime podcast and we're not going to go into the details of those, but they're pretty nasty. And it's the type of thing that might contribute to a legend.
We don't like to wallow in the suffering of people, but also sometimes that stuff is at the root of a legend.
Most importantly from these dates and that detail is that the earliest one, the 1918 one, does involve a confession to a murder by a Lorton prison escapee.
Ooh.
Yep.
All right.
Which was all lies. He falsely confessed to this murder that they were investigating.
Yeah.
Because he was already locked up and he wanted to get transferred to a different prison so he could escape.
Oh, wow.
So he was in a harder to escape from prison and wanted to get transferred.
So admit to a crime that'll get you sent somewhere else.
Yeah.
That is, I'm sure he was a terrible person.
He got the transfer, and they're like, this is our guy. He did this murder.
That's really clever.
And then they were like, now tell us the details. And they were completely wrong.
And he was like, I don't know.
Right.
I killed them.
None of these involved bunny suits. None of these involved hatchets. They were just really awful murders that the people living in the community would have had to process.
Yeah.
And part of the way we process these types of things is by talking about it.
Yeah.
And using them as cautionary tales that you tell kids. Like, hey, this really bad thing happened. That's why we don't do X, Y, or Z.
And folklore becomes a way to talk about terrible things without having to talk about that terrible thing. You know,
one time this guy did this thing, blah, 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 yada, yada. You're not naming names. You're not going into details. But all these different things start to compound. The Bunny Man legend just kind of happened, right?
No, but
we're going to get to it.
Okay, yeah, I'll stop.
It just seemed to kind of blossom. And in 1973, a University of Maryland student, Patricia Johnson, submitted a research paper titled The Bunny Man.
All right. I like her.
Yeah. She interviewed 33 students from Prince George's County, Maryland, ages 15 to 18. And the direct quote from her on why she believes this qualified as an urban belief tale was specifically that it, 1, takes place in an urban setting, 2, existed prior to her project, and 3, had appeared in print as truth.
Okay.
So she said she had sources.
Yeah.
She goes on to state, included in this collection is an article from the Washington Post that verifies the Bunny Man as truth.
Interesting.
Which is what? Wait. So the Maryland Folklore Archive, where her paper is stored, was found by our intrepid investigator to be missing the page containing the references.
Oh, man.
Always keep your references.
Yeah. These days, save it in more than one place.
That's what I did as soon as we finished our thing. Yeah, it's on the hard drive, but I also uploaded it to the cloud.
Right.
So anyway, the cloud will save us all, including our Bunny Man references. What was in the scanned paper was that she found 54 variations on the Bunny Man story.
Wow.
So you wanted to talk about the Venn diagram? She had it. There was 54 unique variations. You're still buckled up, right?
Okay, I am. Yes.
All right.
Okay. I just really need to get to that bunny suit.
14 different geographic locations are mentioned, so they're not always at the bridge. 18 involve the Bunny Man chasing people or scaring people, usually children, wielding a hatchet or an axe. I heard he threw an axe at you. 14 include specifically that he will attack your car. 9 claim that he attacked a couple parked in a car.
Oh.
Virginia is for lovers.
Virginia is for lovers. And so are axes.
Apparently. And bunny suits. 5 accuse him of vandalism on homes or buildings.
Yeah.
And only 3 mentioned murder. So in 1973, it wasn't so much a murder story.
Yeah. Also, this is coincidental with the Zodiac killings, many of which targeted couples. And so, like, that's kind of a way to import that bit of news into a local story, potentially.
It's really fascinating stuff, especially when you look at what we hear today, where it's like, oh, he's going to kill you. Oh, there's dead rabbits everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it gets...
I like the way it gets ramped up over time.
Like, you made a joke about the Rob Zombie reboot. We're living in the era of the Rob Zombie reboot of Bunny Man.
Okay. Yeah.
So, that's all well and good, but what about the article?
Yes.
So, Mr. Conley... Again, most of this is his research. The guy did a banger job.
Yeah.
Noted that inside the paper, the student that authored it said that she first heard the story around Halloween of 1970.
Okay.
So now we roll it back and we have a date to where did the Bunny Man start. So he searched through every copy of the Washington Post for the month of October of 1970. And he found it. He found the article.
Huh.
Yeah. Article titled, Man in Bunny Suit Sought in Fairfax. Fairfax County Police said yesterday they are looking for a man who likes to wear a white bunny rabbit costume and throws hatchets through car windows. Air Force Academy cadet Robert Bennett told police that shortly after midnight last Sunday, he and his fiancee were sitting in a car in the 5400 block of Guinea Road. When a man, quote, dressed in a white suit with long bunny ears, ran from the bushes and shouted, "You're on private property and I have your tag number."
Okay.
The rabbit then threw a wooden-handled hatchet through the car window.
Was the window open?
It doesn't say.
Okay. Yeah.
This is verbatim. I'm just reading this.
Show me the footage, Charlie. No,
Right.
I know.
Right. From the newspaper. The first-year cadet told police, as soon as he threw the hatchet, the rabbit skipped off into the night. That detailed to me, and I'm like, what? What's he like? Toodaloo! Like, it's like obviously a dude in a suit. Like,
I'm just going to say that in 1970, the psychedelics were very powerful.
Bennett and his fiancee were not injured.
Okay.
Police say they have the hatchet, but no other clues in this case.
Really?
Yeah. They say Bennett was visiting an uncle who lives across the street from the spot where the car was parked, and he was in the area to attend last week's Air Force Navy football game. Okay. Yeah.
What would he gain from having lied to the police about this?
I'm guessing it busted the window, because, like, why would he even call the police otherwise?
Yeah.
I'd be like, I'm getting out of there. I'm not going back. There's a guy in a bunny suit.
Yeah, so if we're just, like, driving along. Right. If we're...
hop, 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 hop. Like, I just imagine, like, the cartoon. Pew, 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 pew.
But, like, if we're driving along and this happens and it doesn't break the window and I'm not injured, I definitely would, at first, think I've got to tell somebody. And then I would very quickly think...
I can't tell anybody.
Right, yeah, I can never tell anyone. This must die with me. I would eventually tell my husband about it. But it would be in that sense of, you're going to think I'm just making this up, and I promise I'm not.
One time, there I was.
Right. I was driving through Fairfax, Virginia. But no, like, so if there were damages, then I can understand wanting to file a police report.
Had the hatchet.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me.
It's very strange.
There's pictures of allegedly the hatchet online, like mounted to a little plaque.
I really want to figure out what this dude was up to, other than dressing in a bunny suit and throwing axes at people. 2
weeks later, he appeared again.
Okay.
In the paper. The Rabbit Reappears was the title of the article. Which newspapers used to be so great. This is like J. Jonah Jameson stuff.
Yeah, it is. Like,
bring me the Bunny Man.
Get up there and give me a photo of the...
Right. So, the rabbit reappears. A man wearing a furry rabbit suit with 2 long ears appeared again on Guinea Road in Fairfax County Thursday night, police reported. This time, wielding an axe and chopping away at a roof support on a new house.
Wow.
Yeah,
so now he's into like property damage. Mm-hmm. He's actually downgrading as time goes on.
He's like, that was too far. I went too far. I gotta rein it in. I'm out of control.
I threw one hatchet at a guy in the Air Force, and now the police are looking for me. I'm going to stick to property damage from now on. But like somebody saw this happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's much more to the article. Less than 2 weeks ago, a man wearing what was described as a rabbit suit accused 2 persons in a parked car of trespassing and heaved a hatchet through a closed window of the car at 5400 Guinea Road. They were not hurt. Thursday night's rabbit, wearing a suit described as gray, black, and white, was spotted a block away at 5307 Guinea Road, so in the same area. Paul Phillips, private security guard for a construction company, said he saw the rabbit standing on the front porch of a new but unoccupied house.
I'll be damned.
I started talking to him, Phillips said.
Hey there.
And that's when he started chopping.
I'm not saying I want it to happen to me, but I kind of love the bunny man, you know?
All you people trespass around here, Phillips said, the rabbit told him as he whacked 8 gashes in the pole. If you don't get out of here, I'm going to bust you on the head.
That is wild.
Phillips said he turned around, walked back to his car, and got a gun. The rabbit, still carrying the long-handled axe, ran into the woods.
Wow.
Didn't hop.
Didn't hop. No time for hopping. No. The first time he's like, I've made a good impression, now to make a good exit. This time he's like, gun? No.
Brought an axe to a gunfight.
It would have been funny if he'd yelled over his shoulder, pretend I'm hopping.
So before it made the cartoon noise, it was like, pew, pew, pew. This time it made the cartoon like... The security guard said the man was about 5 feet, 8 inches tall, roughly 160 pounds, maybe in his early 20s.
That really paints a picture. I, in my head, had somebody who was a lot more like Homer Simpson-like.
Right.
Maybe even Grandpa Simpson. You know, oh, you're trespassing.
I'll bust you on the head. I just love I tried talking to him, and that's when he started chopping.
I love that he's
such a great... So I went to get my gun.
I saw the bunny man, and I tried to de-escalate, and that didn't work, so I tried to escalate.
Turns out that didn't work neither.
I don't know. After a fashion, it worked.
Yeah, sure. So we have 2 documented appearances by a bunny-suited figure in the same Fairfax County community. The only question that you can really have here is it a copycat or is it original recipe bunny man?
Because he was wearing a white suit in the first report, right?
Right.
But you know, it's 2 weeks later.
And it is at night.
Like, it's 2 weeks later, it's at night. Let's suppose that the first one was a full moon and the second one is a quarter moon. No, half moon.
He's not going were-rabbit here. I can see where...
No, I'm not doing the... Yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing. And maybe that is where I'm going now. But no, I'm thinking like, what if there was a full moon and a clear sky and the light is like reflecting off of the suit in the first sighting? So he looks like a white bunny suit.
Sure, or even like shadow off of leaves from a tree under a full moon.
You know,
look like spots,
yeah, totally.
Right?
Or it's dirt. Or dirt.
Yeah, or it's just dirt.
I mean, let's be honest. A bunny man who's throwing axes is not keeping that thing clean.
He was hopping and he fell into the line.
You know?
Not to mention the travel. He went one place and then another.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He hopped away the first time, so I mean, you know, he's a little braggy.
Right. I like to know we're workshopping how this is true.
So Conley,
Yeah.
the researcher, goes back to Johnson's paper and finds that 14 tales mention a couple in a parked car being attacked, but 9 of these specifically mention a hatchet being thrown in the car.
Okay.
So then you've got that, you're talking about the Venn diagram, right?
Yeah.
Of the 5 mentioning vandalism, 2 describe columns as being chopped.
All right.
And there's a story by a 17-year-old named G. Taylor that related her experience from it. The same way we talked about, you know, how we heard it. This 17-year-old said, I think it was last year, maybe before that. I came home from school. I was listening to the news. I had just gotten in. I heard there was a man and woman sitting in a car. It could have been teenagers, but they were just parked and all. And all of a sudden, they looked up and there was this bunny, you know, this giant bunny just ran out of the woods, you know, from behind the trees and all. And he ran in front of the car and he had a hatchet and he threw it through the car and just turned around and went back away.
Wow.
Is this like special hatchet delivery?
Right?
That's the worst delivery man ever.
Hatchet is one of my favorite horror film franchises. So
She goes on for quite a while. There's a lot of flavor in her account. And she even says, and on the news, they said the police came. So she heard it on the news. This is 3 years prior to the paper being written. She heard it on the news, and she said the police were involved. So there's potential for police reports.
yeah.
The Fairfax County Police Department has no official record of the assault on Robert Bennett and his fiancée. But
Okay.
they do have an investigation report relating to the October 29th vandalism incident.
No way.
Yeah, and the guy went and got a copy of the report.
Ah, that's amazing.
Like, it's legit.
Yeah.
The investigation report confirms the basics of the event. that we just talked about through the Post article, that at 10:30 p.m. on October 29th, 1970, 6 officers responded to 5307 Guinea Road. Yeah. I'm going to need backup on this one.
I want to know what the code is that they called in. You know,
It's 10.
we've got a 1027, which they're like flipping through a book.
Bunny Man.
You know,
I thought that was a joke one.
right.
The call was for subject dressed as rabbit with an axe.
Wow.
The officers found no rabbit. And the case was turned over to an investigator, W.L. Johnson of the Criminal Investigation Bureau, which I guess is like their detective unit or
whatever.
He began with a visit to the construction offices of the Kings Park West subdivision on October 31st.
Yeah.
He also found no rabbit. But he did receive a call shortly after his visit from someone who worked at Kings Park West. The caller claimed to have just received a telephone call. So he went there, saw nothing, left, and then someone called in to the office. Identified himself as the Axeman. The Axeman allegedly said, "You've been messing up my property, dumping tree stumps, limbs, and brush and other things on my property." The Axeman further stated, "You can make everything right by meeting me tonight and talking about the situation."
I'm not going to meet a dude in a bunny suit with an axe. I have gotten some sketchy invitations in my time, I will just say. And that is beyond anything.
The representative from the developer said he sounded to be a white male in his late teens or early 20s. So the police set up a stakeout.
I love it.
There was a stakeout on the Bunny Man.
This is amazing. Okay, yeah, keep going.
No rabbit was caught.
Oh.
On November 4th, investigator Johnson received a call from a resident of the area who informed him that her son claimed to know the Bunny Man.
Huh.
Yeah. She stated some of the neighborhood children who are aware of the Bunny Man described him as an older teenager. So the investigator went out and interviewed the kid. The kid was 8 years old. The 8-year-old said, "I've never actually met the Bunny Man." It was already starting with 8-year-olds in 1970?
Yeah.
So they're already, like, that's where it really began.
Interesting. Okay.
But they had talked about it, and they talked about it at school. All the kids at the school were talking about the Bunny Man, like, "Oh, Bunny Man's going to get you," stuff like that.
Yeah.
A couple months later, March 14th, 1971, Johnson writes the following summary. After a very extensive investigation into this and all the other cases of the same nature, it is still unsubstantiated as to whether or not there really is a white rabbit.
I feel like there is.
No, there absolutely is.
I don't know. I mean, like, I get why he's trying to say that there's not necessarily, you know.
Right.
But there he is.
No,
this
definitely.
happened. Nobody was randomly making up coincidentally identical bunny stories.
You have unrelated complainants, right?
Yeah.
You have unrelated complainants. You got kids saying stuff.
But sure. But, you know. Okay.
We'll put that in the slush pile. That, like,
nobody in the Air Force got convinced of the existence of the Bunny Man by a local 8-year-old and decided to fake a report.
Right.
You know?
Basically, he marks the case as inactive, but the Bunny Man was real.
Yeah.
The Bunny Man was absolutely... So that goes to the whole, like, what could the Bunny Man's motivation have possibly been?
I feel like he made it pretty clear. Yeah. I feel like he communicated this. He stated his needs.
You know we try to go deeper.
Okay.
So Kings Park West is a subdivision of over 1,500 homes.
Oh, Lord.
It is absolutely massive. And it was only one of several such developments in the area.
Wow.
The first countywide comprehensive land use plan was not adopted until 1975.
Okay, and I can tell you from my Appalachian Studies program that the best way to piss off locals is to start building new stuff.
So we knew it was super rural, right?
Yeah.
Lots of farms. People living in Fairfax County in the 60s and 70s basically just watched pastures and woods and forests getting redeveloped, not really having a say in it because there was no land use plan. And that can elicit some behaviors in people.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the bunny suit that was just something that was laying around. And then, this is the best disguise I can have. No one will ever know who I am.
I mean, it's a pretty good way to cover up all your features in a hurry.
Yeah,
One zipper and you're invisible.
If I'm going out for some mild eco-terrorism, I'm certainly going to go with a furry friend.
Yeah, he could have just gone to any Halloween shop at the time.
They actually did have, like I said, looking at the clock and people are starting to come in, possibly for the next one. But
sorry. I've talked a lot.
no, that's not what I was about to. What I was about to go at was there's additional details that I didn't have time to go into, but they did go to local stores and be like, let me see all your Halloween costume and go looking for rabbits. And they found whatever company it was that makes Halloween costumes, which I remember Halloween costumes that were basically a plastic trash bag and they would have printed on the front what you were supposed to be. And then you'd have like
the plastic.
Right. Like this must have been kind of nice. Like it wasn't that.
Yeah. If it were today, it would be Sexy Bunny Man, and that would be really distressing.
Spirit Halloween exclusive. Sexy Bunny Man.
Have a little... Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
I'll spare everyone. This is what happens when you make a show with a horror writer. I'm sorry.
That's the story of the Bunny Man. So it's one of those urban legends that gets repeated. And here's the thing about it that's wild about how it spread. So last year at GalaxyCon Raleigh, we had a very full room and we did our hour. And then we had to impromptu fill another hour.
Yeah, because it turned out there was miscommunication.
So to do that, we just started doing Q&A and just basically having a conversation and then just being like, hey, what do you think about aliens? Hey, what do you think about Bigfoot? Hey, what do you think about this? And people started shouting out suggestions about what we should talk about and we'd riff on it. There was this little kid in a Pikachu suit and
he threw an axe at us. No.
I used to be a third co-host. Right. He asked a lot of questions and he was like, what do you think about Mothman? What do you think about, and he was just going down the list and I was entertaining it. Then he's like, what do you think about the Bunny Man? And I was like, what do you even know about the Bunny Man? We're in Raleigh, North Carolina. How do you know that? Because the only way I knew it was from University of Maryland.
Yeah.
Right?
And I remember the time being like, what shows is this kid watching?
Right. Well, you asked me afterwards where you were like, it's the Bunny Man. I was like, oh, I know about the Bunny Man. We're saving that. So we saved it for a year.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. But that just goes to show once one of these urban legends starts gaining traction, you've got people in Maryland talking about it, Virginia talking about it, DC, down in North Carolina. It's on TV. There is a metal band that wrote a rock opera about the Bunny Man.
What?
Yeah. Dude, there is so much. Like, seriously, we could have talked about the Bunny Man all night. We could have talked about the Bunny Man until the sun came up, the amount of fandom that this urban legend has.
But this is one of the things that I legitimately love about folklore. Every town has something like this.
Yeah.
That is the story that kids tell each other and the story that parents use as a cautionary tale to keep their kids at home or whatever. Stories like this that communicate something important. From
Every
generation
town
to
has
generation.
Blackbeard's ghosts.
Everyone's ghost. I grew up in Appalachia and we had Blackbeard's ghost. No, we didn't, but we practically could have. But every town has a weird monster. Every town has the phantom hitchhiker.
Yep. Crybaby Bridge is a thing.
Crybaby Bridge, Gravity Road.
Hill, where the car moves the weird way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But every town has one. Like
everybody's got something like this.
Right.
Yeah.
We got
Do we have time for a what if?
Yeah.
So one of the games we sometimes play is if it's a topic that I did not research, then I'll do it if I were going to use this in a book. And it would be awfully tempting to just use it as is. But I feel like it would be much more interesting to try to turn the sock inside out on the story. He tells everybody why he's throwing axes at them and etc. Sure, great, whatever. What if one of the people involved in investing in this development isn't sure that they're going to be able to sell 1,500 houses in what at the time is the middle of nowhere? And so they Scooby-Doo it up and they convince his kid, I will triple your allowance for 6 months if you'll put on this bunny suit and go throw an axe at some people and just cause a scene. Just enough of a scene for me to make sure that we can get a good insurance payout if this holding goes under. And then you don't even have the supernatural story and you don't even necessarily have the true crime. You've just got a crime thriller. You've just got a detective story waiting to happen.
What if he missed?
Yeah, right. But so that's the setup. They do this as an insurance scam, and then he hits somebody with the axe, and then you've got something you've really got to cover up, and that's your mystery.
That really took a turn.
Yeah.
A murdery turn.
I mean, you're the one who did a story about a dude in a bunny suit throwing axes.
But so let's go back. Let's take a second and rewind to the stories that we talked about with the escapee convict.
Yeah.
Right? That confessed to this murder. That's where the asylum stuff comes from, right? Because, and you've got all these murders in the community and you've got all these stories being repeated about like, oh, one time this guy killed this person. One time this guy did this. One time this guy did that during a prison transfer, whatever. And they just sort of get rolled into what you now see on the internet, which is, or here at parties or, riding around with friends. It's like, oh, he hangs rabbits from the thing to warn you to not come near. And if you do come near, he's going to jump out of the bushes and hit you with his axe or, kill you, chop you up. It's a psychopath, like all this stuff. And I think that's really fascinating how things grow and expand and change. And yeah, I really like the Bunnyman story because it is quintessential folklore, urban legend. It has all the elements.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind the scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com or visit my publisher, Falstaff Books, at falstaffbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.